Do you need a break?
You read my mind.
Come with me.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world beyond imagination. I always love that song from, is it from Willy Wonka? I think it is. I still have to go and watch that new movie. I love Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory as a story. I can't believe I haven't been to the theaters yet. Welcome to this episode of The Break, number 3 of the year 2024. And I am so looking forward to doing this every Wednesday on at the same time. So I'm streaming this live as I'm recording this. And the difference with last year is that I'm going to try as much as I can to always stream this live, so you can join me live and actually, have like a more personal experience of the show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central European time. So that's Amsterdam time, noon. Not Easter Coast, the Easter Islands, no, noon in New York, and 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. So you can just mark it in your calendar. I will do whatever I can to be here every week. And of course, if you can't make it for whatever reason, or you're in some part of the world where you are asleep during that time, then there's always the podcast and there's always the live stream on my YouTube channel. Just go to Father Roderick. That's my main YouTube channel. So this show is brought to you thanks to my patrons. If you want to join the community and support the work that I do, and I really depend on the support of my patrons, go to patreon.com/Father Roderick, and you get an extra long version of this show, the premium edition, where I talk about a lot of stuff that I can't cram into the public show. So if you want a little bit of extra, as a thank you for your patronage, go to patreon.com/Father Roderick.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This still remains one of my favorite scenes of the Ahsoka television series. It was such a nostalgic moment where they integrate that opening sentence of Star Wars, the first thing I ever saw in my life when it comes to Star Wars, because that's how the first movie started, that they integrated that into the canon of the story itself, and having that conversation, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, kind of bringing back the magic of storytelling into the world of Star Wars itself. Star Wars is not just a story, but it contains a lot of stories within the stories, and that's what I love about the news that came out in these past few weeks. About these new movies. We got 4 Star Wars movies, and there are lots of theories about how all of a sudden they brought us the news of this 4th movie, which apparently is going to be the first one we're going to see in theaters. And one of those theories says, well, it may be because the movie that would feature Rey Skywalker is in trouble. Maybe there have been some, there's a power struggle. There's always the same stories when it comes to Star Wars. There's a certain part of the fandom that is only interested, it seems, in negative stories. And so they always spin something, and then, of course, sometimes Disney reacts. Most of the time they don't. But apparently, from what I've heard, there are no problems when it comes to that movie. I think it's just pragmatic. It's a marketing decision. We haven't seen Star Wars in theaters for many years now, and Grogu and The Mandalorian are the most recognizable, fresh Star Wars faces or characters that people can relate to. And even if you don't watch the series on Disney Plus, everybody has seen the merchandise. Everybody has a Baby Yoda or a Grogu, even kids that have never seen a single minute of Star Wars. And so I think it's a very smart marketing move to push that movie as the first story. Plus, as I mentioned last week, they probably already have everything in place. What I speculated last week is that they were also going to film another season of The Mandalorian, and it turns out that may actually not be the case. It could very well be that instead of a new season of The Mandalorian, this movie is going to be the continuation of that story. So personally, I hope that we will get another TV series. However, I wouldn't be surprised if next year, so 25, we will get Andor and season 2 of Ahsoka. And that The Mandalorian is not as important to Disney to keep people subscribe to Disney Plus. They'll have 2 television series every year, live action series, and then some animation. And that's probably going to be enough. They do have to somehow also cut costs, apparently. And so I'm thinking probably the movie is going to be the continuation of the television series. And then we'll see from there if they're still, enough in that story to continue to go back to TV. Or, I don't know, maybe if it's a massive box office hit, they will do a trilogy with Grogu and The Mandalorian. Who knows? There was also some news about the movie featuring Rey. And that was more related to the fandom. And I want to address it here on the show as well. You know me. I always love to talk about my passion for Star Wars, how much I love Star Wars, how much it means to me, even the stuff that maybe from an objective point of view is, not the best storytelling or the best production value. Since Disney took over, of course, it's been a bit all over the place in terms of quality, although in general, it's all Star Wars, so for me, it's all good. It's just you have good and you have better. And of course, as a Star Wars fan, I want everything to be the best, because Star Wars deserves it. But in reality, of course, given the constraints of the production and the incredible amount of stories that had to be told in such a short time, because they wanted to build up the audience for Disney Plus, I understand that not everything could be top notch. But when it comes to this story about Rey and the continuation of her story, we had this whole controversy online when it comes to what the director had said about how she likes to make men feel uncomfortable. I talked about that last week. No need to repeat that here. But what is interesting, what is new, is that particular very sour, very toxic type of talk about the movie with Rey. All of a sudden saw a re-emergence of the fans, the fans that love Star Wars, because there was this one Star Wars YouTuber who has a channel called Star Wars Theory. He's been around for many, many years. He started as a very enthusiastic Star Wars fan who would just make videos, mostly talking head videos about his love for Star Wars. But then the last couple of years, he started to become more and more negative, and now it's even like it's all very kind of political, and his channel seems to thrive from all the toxicity and all the controversy, and so he was like doing video after video on how much Star Wars is going in the wrong direction, and Kathleen Kennedy should be fired because she has messed up Star Wars. And it's completely nonsense, because since Kathleen Kennedy took over, we've also seen Andor. We've also seen many incredible new developments within Star Wars, and all that can be attributed to her leadership. And so I don't buy that for a second, but I think that this guy is using the controversy to get eyeballs to make money. It's oftentimes as simple as that. It's just a way to make more money, because the more people are engaged with the video, the more the algorithm will spread that content, and so the more money he makes off the advertisements. It's sad, but unfortunately, this is a certain marketing technique to use controversy to be as polemic as possible so that you get a lot of reaction and a lot of engagement. Even if it's negative, some people don't care as long as it makes them money. What I found extremely heartwarming is that in one of his shows, he had someone on his show that he interviewed who said, this was a lady, and she said, Star Wars is not for women. Star Wars is not for girls. Star Wars is for boys, is for men. And then you saw this incredible reaction from the female part of the fandom, and it's huge. This is a global movement. And so you had so many women and girls coming out of the, well, I shouldn't say coming out of the woodwork. They've been around in the realm of Star Wars fandom since forever, but they were making videos how much Star Wars meant to them and how much it empowers them as a girl, as a woman, and how much Star Wars is also about women and how strong women have always been part of Star Wars, starting with Princess Leia. For goodness sakes, how can you say that Star Wars is not for women if you've seen 1 minute of The New Hope? Leia is one of the main characters there, and she is the one that constantly moves the story forward. So it's so nonsensical. But it was also, what I loved about the way in which many people reacted was that instead of being vitriolic themselves and lashing out and making angry videos and rebuttals and whatnot, almost every video that I saw in defense of Star Wars, in defense of women in Star Wars, were positive videos where they did address the negativity, but they said, you know what? It's wrong. It's so not true, because this is what Star Wars has meant for me since I was a young girl. And what I also thought was very beautiful was that you get this very young generation, and I say this as, having the age of Obi-Wan Kenobi myself. You have these young girls who actually got to know Star Wars through the character of Rey, who saw The Force Awakens when they were 8 years old, and they dressed up as Rey and on parties. And that brings me back to the way in which I was introduced to the world of Star Wars as a young boy, also 8 years old, and I dressed up like Luke Skywalker. And so for them, Rey is the new Luke Skywalker. And so for them, it's so incredibly hurtful to have someone say, well, you're a girl, so Star Wars is not for you. When Star Wars is to them just as important as Star Wars has been to me for my entire life. What gives someone the right to be a gatekeeper for what I am supposed to like and what is supposed to be? Anyway, I think that I was waiting for this reaction. I was waiting for the Star Wars fans to show the power of positive fandom, where you share what makes a story dear to you, because you cannot argue with that. As long as you put it on a political plane, it's like, oh, well, Star Wars has become woke, or Star Wars is just all about feminism nowadays. It's so contradictory as well, because on one hand they say it's too woke, it's too feminist, and then on the other side they say Star Wars is for men only. It's like, okay, so what exactly do you want? But what I actually love is that it's almost the fans feel like rebels, and they're taking back their universe, and all these gatekeepers, all these people that seem to be so full of dark side energy, always trying to hurt other people, to hurt the franchise, to complain and to whine. All that melts away when it's confronted with a positive personal story, because that's personal. It's, if you say I love Star Wars because Rey has been a role model for me, no one can take that away from you. And I'm glad that Star Wars fans are speaking up, because this is something broader than Star Wars. When it comes to negativity in media surrounding everything nowadays, we have a tendency to, our first reaction is either we don't say anything, we don't want to get involved, move along, these are not the droids you're looking for, or we get angry. And then we hit back because someone is, we allow ourselves to be hurt and affected by the opinion of someone we don't even know, but we still feel, and this is what's been going on for years now on social media. It's like this reaction, counter-reaction. I insult you, then I have the right to insult you. None of that leads to anything positive. And it's this bitterness that pervades our Western society, I think, is maybe the biggest sign that the dark side is real. All the division, and it comes just from words. It's words. What kind of words do you speak? Do you speak words that are building up someone, that are putting in the forefront what's positive about the way you experience media and stories? Or are you always looking for what's negative? Think of the way you were raised as a child. Imagine parents that are only always pointing out what is wrong with you, the things you do wrong, the things you can't do, the things you messed up. How does that affect you as a child? How does it affect the world around you? And then next to that, think of parents that are affirming, that are, yes, correcting mistakes, but always from the perspective, we want this child to grow, we want to help. We were once children as well. We too have our flaws, but let's together try to seek how we can build each other up. That's the kind of education that makes people flourish and grow and get strong and be positive themselves. And I think this is true. We're all, to a certain extent, educators of one another. We all have a responsibility in our words. It's not just that, but nobody knows who I am on social media, so I can just say whatever I feel. But you know what? We should think before we say something. And I always remember what Yoda says about what wars in general. And it also applies to the culture wars and the wars with words that we find ourselves in every day. Wars don't make one great. Wars don't make one great. So don't take pride in, I'm so able on the internet to parry the attacks from the enemy, and then I'm even more witty and more. No. Speak up when someone is hurting other people, but always counter negativity and aggression with positivity, with affirmation, with joy. Nothing can resist that. That is, I think, the heart of the story of Star Wars. This powerful empire that thinks that only power can keep everybody in line is completely demolished and crushed by the enthusiasm, the joy, the friendship, and the bond of these young rebels. And they're not very loud in the universe of Star Wars. And the same is true for a lot of Star Wars fans. They're not very loud. It seems as, if you don't make your money off of controversy, then the algorithm doesn't notice you, but it doesn't mean that your voice doesn't count. And that's what I loved about what happened this past week. It's like all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, the Star Wars fans are still here. And they show the world what Star Wars is truly about. And I want to join them. This is a rebellion that I love and that I want to be a part of.
The most beloved fantasy story of all time. It is the tale of a small hobbit and the great wizard who appeared to him one day.
All right, dude, check it out. Go like that way, and then up this one mountain, and then kill all the hippies you come across.
No, I'm searching for a dragon's treasure.
I'm the wizard, you're the dwarf, and you will respect my authority.
I am no dwarf.
Do you know that I'm actually walking to Mordor as we speak? Well, not really as we speak, because I'm standing behind my microphone right now. But today, I've been walking towards Mordor. I'm not kidding you. This is an app that I found at the beginning of the year. And it is, what is it called? Like Adventure Hike or something like that? Just Google it. It's not an officially licensed app that uses the names, etc. So you don't walk to Mordor, you walk to Mount something. It's like it's a play on it. It's an homage, you could say, to the story of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. But it's a walking app. And you start in a situation that looks identical to the Shire, and you're going on an adventure. And the quest is to walk all the way to Mount Doom or something like that, and to destroy a ring. It's not the ring, it's a ring. And you are not alone on that adventure. In fact, there is Mr. Underhill. And Mr. Underhill has also left the Shire and is walking in the same direction as you. But despite the fact that it's a small fellow, they don't say hobbit because that's a trademark, it's a small fellow, he is incredibly dedicated to his quest. So he walks so fast. He can easily walk like 10 or 12 miles per day. And then what the app does, it counts your footsteps, and it measures it up against Mr. Underhill. And so you have this map on the app itself. The app is, I think, it's $4 or something. It's really not very expensive, and it shows you a map, and it also has this beautiful artwork every day where you see. It's a bit like silhouette. It's reminiscent of some of the posters that came out around the Lord of the Rings, where you have the silhouette of the Fellowship against beautiful backdrops of mountains and stuff. Well, they emulate that in the app. And it also shows you sometimes what happens after a day of walking. It says, oh, you're now taking some time to rest at a campfire, or you're in a small village and you're meeting some locals here, and they point you in the right direction, etc. So there's a little bit of storytelling. It looks a very beautiful app. But if you can't keep up with Bilbo, and you know what? I love to walk. I walk a lot. I run a lot. But even I can't keep up with Mr. Underhill, so he's going to be at that mountain way earlier than I am. But thankfully, he's not the only one. There's also a certain fellow called John Snowflake. And John Snowflake is a lot slower because he's a bit ADHD, so he's constantly distracted, and then he gets into a sword fight, or he needs to polish his boots and whatnot, or his horse is hungry, so he trails behind Mr. Underhill. And so he's a little bit easier to keep up with. But I did have a couple of days where I couldn't even keep up with John Snowflake. And then, thankfully for me, there is a third person. I think there are actually 4 in total. I forgot there's this one other person that is walking. But there's also Harry Potterfoot. Was it Harry Potterfoot or Harry? No, it's Potter Harryfoot. It's Potter Harryfoot or something like that. Sounds like a hobbit, and it sounds like a certain wizard boy. And I think it's Potter Harryfoot, but I'm not certain. Walks extremely slow and is really, really easy to keep up with. And in fact, I think I'm now ahead of him. So he's taking his time. I just hope that he's not going to use some flu powder all of a sudden to get ahead of me through magic. That can happen as well. But it is a really fun app, and you can start whenever you want. You know, I started this at the beginning of the year because I wanted to have a goal. And this seemed to be, there are also other apps that do the same, and they are licensed. There is this one app, and you get actually a reward when you walk a certain distance with the Fellowship. And it's this beautiful medal that they send you, and it's like, or even like a miniature version of the ring encased in a beautiful Shire 3D whatever plaque that you could put on the mantle at home. But that is a service, and you pay a lot of money for that. This one is free because it's not licensed, and it gets very close. So I'm like, legally, they're taking some risks there, I believe. But it's a lot of fun, and I think it holds up. Let's see what it's called. I'm trying to. It's called Fantasy Hike. And it's available on iOS. I'm not sure if there is also a version for Android. And I think you can also use it for free. Yes, you can use it for free, but then you can only walk a very small distance. So if you only walk a few kilometers every day or a few miles, you may want to try out the free version. If you walk more, if you want to keep up with Mr. Underhill or even John Snowflake, then you probably want to purchase the unlimited distance version, or the unlock. But it's a lot of fun. It's a beautiful app, and I just wanted to mention it here. So I have another excuse to talk about The Lord of the Rings. Oh.
Japanimation. Yeah. Cool.
This year, I'm really getting back into anime, and what I'm doing every month is to pick one anime series that I watch in a more consistent way. And this first month of the year, it's going to be Vinland Saga. It has only got 2 seasons, so it's a little bit easier to get through because it has the seasons are pretty long. Every episode is about half an hour, and I think there are like 20 per season. So it's not like modern day television series where you only have 6 episodes. So it does require some work to get through, but the story is so fascinating. And I love, I've mentioned this before, how they use real history to inspire the story. The story itself is not historical, but they do use a lot of historical elements. And the other day I was thinking about a story for TikTok, because I've got a lot of anime people following me on TikTok. By the way, hi if you're one of them. And what I found difficult is how can I find a good way to educate people, but also I want my videos on TikTok to be a bit personal. Because that's what I love about stories. It's not just that I learn something about church history, but I also want to know how it affects me. And so I've been working with the Copilot, which is the Microsoft app that uses ChatGPT 4. And I just asked it the other day, can you help me? I want to make a short video, and I need a script about the episodes of Vinland Saga that I've seen. I don't recall exactly how many there were, and just give me some ideas for an educational video, etc. And then it starts to regurgitate like all this Wikipedia info about Canute, Prince Canute. Prince Canute, I think I've mentioned him before. He's this very weak-looking, very almost feminine guy who they come across. He's the son of a very brutal Danish king. And when his father dies, he is supposed to take over not just Denmark, but also England. And but he's introduced in the story as this very devout Christian who has no spine almost. And then throughout the story, we know that historically, this guy actually becomes one of the most famous rulers of the Viking time, of the Viking era. And so I'm interested, of course, in seeing the evolution and how they will probably pair up this guy with the main character, Thorfinn, of the story, because they're more or less the same age. And Thorfinn hates Canute. He's like, this Canute, why do I need to hang out with him? Why do I need to protect him? He's worth nothing. And then in the end, I think that they're going to team up. And it's my theory that Thorfinn will actually convert to Christianity over time. But then when I read the script that ChatGPT produced, it was so technical, and there were so many like years, and there was this war, and then that happened, and I'm training myself to use artificial intelligence as if it is just someone who is able to help me with finding ideas. And so I just reacted like, oh, that's a boring story. Can you just do another try and make it a little bit more engaging and more personal? And then it did a slightly better version, but it was still very much based on all that historical data. And I was like, why don't I like this? And it was twofold. It was one of the reasons that I didn't care for that script was it reminded me of the way in which I was taught history in school. I had, unfortunately, very boring teachers for history. And it's just beyond me why. Because why would you study history and want to become a teacher in history when you can't tell stories? History is all about storytelling. And for some reason, I always had teachers who turned it into like, in the year 1632, as you can see in chapter 5 of your book, the local king made contact with the 2 ambassadors who then went forth to the town of bloody blah, where Count so-and-so was having trouble with the local economy. And it's like, I'm like, what? Why is this interesting? Why should I learn all these years and people? And there was no heart in those stories. There was, for me, what kills history and history teaching is if you cannot show me why what happened in the past is relevant for today. I think that angle is super important. For me, it's very similar to what I try to do on Sunday morning when I preach. Of course, I could give a course on, biblical history. And if we look at what the prophet Isaiah writes here, it's probably a retelling of the war that took place 200 years before that, and all the intricacies of the Hebrew, the biblical Hebrew, and nobody would be awake. So the only way that I can read the Bible and preach about it is if I look at the text and try to understand what the original context was of that story, to understand what the purpose was and the intent was of the writer in that time. And then my hypothesis is always that people don't change. Countries change and political situations change, but people never change. The people that lived in the time of Jesus and even before that, they're still extremely similar to us. They react in the same way. Their psychology is the same. The things that they loved, the things that they hated, the things they were afraid of, all these emotionally connected issues, they were probably very similar, even though they didn't have the internet, they didn't have cars, they didn't have etc. So that is what makes it, for me, possible to take what was important to the people back then and translate it into a message that is important to us today. And it requires you to understand the context. So you need to know the historical data, and you need to maybe also study history. But if you can't translate that story to today, to the people that are following my story, what I try to teach, then it's not going to work. Nobody's going to watch it. When we were in school, we had to sit and listen, because otherwise there would be consequences. But with the internet, that's no longer the case. People just swipe to the next video if it's not interesting. So that is for me, it's a big challenge on how can I make every video that I create relevant. And the more relevant it is, the more people will watch it. And then they may learn something in the process, but only if it has a meaning to them. I don't think that a lot of young people nowadays have the patience to just gather information without knowing exactly why they should. And I think it also robs history of its truly transformative power. I think one of the main reasons that we need to study history is that it can teach us about today, and it can help us to also interpret current day events. Because almost anything that happens today has happened before. It's just because humans don't change that much. And this is, I think, why the Bible stays so relevant, because ultimately it's God's word. It's a conversation, you could say, between God and us. And the people back then were very similar to us nowadays. And so God never changes. And that makes those stories so relevant, so true for today. But you need to always look at the way you retell that story and strip it from the stuff that is no longer relevant. And in this case, I would say I'm still trying to figure out a way to talk about Vinland Saga on TikTok without being boring, without being the history teacher that just mentions years and frontiers and movements of Viking ships, and none of that matters. It's like, why is that story still so important to us? And I think ultimately it is, for me, it's going to be in the conversion of these two boys. One from being this devout but very powerless prince turned king, and then Thorfinn, who is so bitter and so hurt and so traumatized by the murder of his father that his initial reaction can only be violence. And then through his contact with Canute, with Christianity, he slowly learns that there is another answer to violence, and it's not violence. It's peace. It is wisdom. And I think that's a very strong element of the story, and that is exactly what I just talked about in the earlier segment. It's like, how do we react to negativity and to toxicity and to aggression? Do we just fight like Thorfinn does, or Can we find a more civilized way to react? And as Star Wars fans, I think we do owe George Lucas this civilized reaction. We're part of a more civilized age, I hope. At least we tell ourselves. Hey, thank you so much for joining me. And if you want to listen to more stories and listen to a longer version of the show, the door is wide open to my Patreon community. And it's a lovely community where actually, when I talk about positive people and sharing positive fandom, this is why I have this community where we protect it so that it is a place where you can be yourself, you can just be enthusiastic about Star Wars. Nobody's going to talk down to you or be aggressive or anything. We really want this to be a community where everybody feels valued and just happy to be there. And I'm happy to be there as well. So, yeah, take a look. In the premium part of the show, I'll be talking a little bit more about a book that I've read that may surprise some of my followers, because it's not a fantasy book, it's not science fiction. It's the biography of none other than Britney Spears. Now, why on earth would I read that book and what I think of it, all that and more, coming in the premium version of the show. All right. Enough advertisement for my premium package. Thank you so much. It was always a joy. And maybe you'll see you live next week, Wednesday at 6 Central European Time, noon Eastern Time, 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific Time. Hope to see you live.